and welcome to A Decade in Review. I'm Zainab Kion.
And I'm Anthony Palladino. I hope you are all enjoying your New Year's Eve tonight as we review some of the most important moments of these last 10 years before counting down to 1930. It certainly has been an exciting decade, hasn't it, Zainab?
It sure has. The 20s will surely be something for the history books, especially with some recent amendment changes. One of the most important moments of this decade was the passage of the 18th Amendment. And here's Pat to tell you about it.
In the year 1920, the 18th Amendment was passed. This new amendment prohibited the sale of alcoholic beverages. Passed after the temperance movement, the 18th Amendment has actually led to an increase of organized crime in the United States. It also led to an increase in the number of speakeasies, most of which are still working today. Many people were vocal about their opinions, like these protesters. For example, these women held up a sign that said, "Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours." And these men protested with signs that read, "We want beer." It certainly brought some unexpected changes. Back to you, Zainab and Anthony.
Thanks, Pala. There is also the passage of the 19th Amendment.
In 1920, the amendment was passed and stated that no citizen can be denied the right to vote based on their gender.
The passage of the amendment overruled Minor versus Happersett, which said that the 14th Amendment did not apply to women and it did not give the right to vote to women.
The amendment was first drafted by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony in 1878. The amendment was finally passed 42 years later.
As many of you probably remember, the final state that was needed to ratify the amendment was Tennessee.
The passage of this amendment was one of the defining moments of this decade. We have seen some big steps taken towards giving women equal rights, and looking back into our archives, we even found the footage of the first women voting. Take a look.
I know I was certainly happy about that amendment, and I'm sure our next reporter is too.
We now go live with Kara Constantine outside the forum with a decade in review on a sports team that you'll want to keep your eye on for years to come. Kara?
Thanks, Anthony. Like you said, I'm here in the Forum in Montreal, where the Montreal Canadiens had the night off for the holiday, but are going right back to playing this Saturday at 2 p.m. This past decade, they captured their second Stanley Cup after completing an undefeated postseason run, and this was their first Cup as a member of the NHL. The 20s marked their first few years of being members of the National Hockey League, and the league just keeps getting bigger and more exciting, and is sure to flourish in the many years to come. For a little bit more on the league, let's head back to Anthony in the studio.
Thanks, Kara. It's really great to see how many people are becoming involved in such a young league. The NHL has only been around since 1917, but it's already captured such a large fan base.
Charlie Chaplin managed to do the same, and has captured the heart of thousands of Americans. Megan got the chance to sit down and talk to him.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, Mr. Chaplin. It's a pleasure to meet you. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you for asking.
My, how you've changed.
Yes, the past 10 years have been excellent.
Yes, this decade has been excellent for you. You were in the film A Woman in Paris in 1922. After the movie was released, some people were disappointed that you had a smaller role. It wasn't very similar to the roles you've had in films.
Yes, many people were disappointed about that. Many people were worried that after this film I would stop starring in films, but we made efforts to reassure the public that this was just a deviation from my normal work. I still think that it was an excellent film, and I was upset that more people did not see it.
After A Woman in Paris, you returned to comedy with Gold Rush. How were your thoughts about this film?
The Gold Rush is one of my personal favorite films that I have ever made. The public seemed to receive it well, and it is nice that other people enjoyed it as well.
It was wonderful speaking with you. Good luck with your future endeavors and Happy New Year. For our viewers at home, we will be right back after this word from our sponsors. After a long day of work or play, we know you just need that quick break. Coca-Cola, the pause that refreshes.
Now we head over to the finance portion of the evening. Zainab?
Thank you, Anthony. We can all agree that the stock market crash was the greatest tragedy that has hit us as a nation, and most of our fellow Americans are still feeling the despairing effects of it today. Even as we try to repair and restore our lives after this disaster, This nation will always be affected by the stock market crash that has gripped this decade. Although it is known fact that the stock market has the reputation of being a risky investment, it did not appear that way in the early 20s. With the economy on the rise and the country feeling the contagious exhilaration due to the roaring 20s, the stock market seemed like an infallible investment for the future. Therefore, the number of people investing in the stock market skyrocketed, and the prices began to rise. This was first noticeable in 1925. Stock prices had a strong upward trend in 1927, and by 1928, a stock market boom had begun. On September 3, 1928, the Dow Jones reached a peak of $381.17. In 1928, the stock market had become a place where anyone truly believed that they could become rich. Although an increasing number of people wanted to buy stocks, not everyone had the money to do so. By early 1929, people across the United States were desperate to get into the stock market. People were so confident in the profits that even banks placed customers' money in the stock market. On March 25, 1929, the stock market suffered a mini crash. As prices began to drop, panic enveloped the country. When banker Charles Mitchell made an announcement that his bank would keep lending, his reassurance stopped the panic, but it did not stop the big crash. On the morning of Thursday, October 24, 1929, stock prices plummeted. Vast numbers of people were selling their stocks. Margin calls were sent out. People across the country watched the ticker as the numbers it printed out meant the worst. People had truly lost everything. To the great relief of many, the panic subsided in the afternoon. Charles E. Mitchell, the president of National City Bank of New York, Albert Wiggin, the head of Chase National Bank, and Thomas Lamont, the head of Morgan Bank, met to find a solution to the chaos on the trading floor again. They pooled their money and invested a large sum back into the stock market. 4 days later, the stock market fell again on October 29, 1929, also known as Black Tuesday, a date that will forever be remembered in stock market history. There were so many orders to sell that the ticker quickly fell behind, and by the end of the close, it had lagged to 2.5 hours behind. People were in panic. They couldn't get rid of their stocks fast enough. Over 16.4 million shares of stocks were sold. Since everyone was selling and nearly no one was buying, stock prices collapsed. Panic hit the country. During November of 1929, the Dow sank from $400 to $145. In just 3 days, over $5 million worth of market capitalization had been lost from stocks that were trading in the New York Stock Exchange. By the end of the 1929 stock market crash, a staggering $16 billion worth of market capitalization had been lost from the New York Stock Exchange. The fallout of the stock market crash is still greatly felt. Many people lost their entire savings, numerous companies were ruined, and the faith in banks was destroyed. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that I hope 1930 is a better year for the stock market.
On a lighter note, here's Megan with our fashion editorial of the 1920s.
Thank you, Zainab and Anthony. While the roaring 20s have certainly brought major changes in the fashion choices of young women, throughout the decade, dresses began to be worn with shorter hemlines as well as pleats and slits to allow for more motion. The most memorable change of the decade is undoubtedly the flapper look. Women began to cut their hair shorter and shorter and embrace the bob. These new short hairstyles allowed women to wear trendy hats and hairpieces. Dresses were worn with straight bodices and collars. Seeing women in pleated skirts with hemlines approximately 1 inch above the knee became the new normal. The corset was forgotten and replaced by camisoles and bloomers. Women embraced an overall boyish look with their new short hair, looser fitting clothing, and less structured clothing. On top of this new look, makeup began to be worn and be more and more popular throughout the decade. Well, I have a flapper here with me to model these awesome new fashion statements of the decade. I personally love them. Her beautiful fringe dress and boa. Look at that beautiful headpiece. Now here are some pictures of other fashions throughout the decade. Aren't these skirts beautiful? Here are some more. Now here's the best. This is the best picture of this beautiful dress, which somewhat resembles what Paola is wearing here, except the hemline on this one's a little bit shorter. This one came at the end of the decade. Well, now back to Zainab and Anthony.
You know what this reminds me of?
The Teapot Dome scandal.
As you may know, the Teapot Dome scandal took place during Warren Harding's presidency. The Secretary of the Interior, Albert Bacon Fall, began to secretly lease federal oil reserves to oil companies. In particular, Fall granted the Mammoth Oil Company exclusive rights to the Teapot Dome Reserve. He also granted similar rights to the Pan American Petroleum Company for the Elk Hills and Buena Vista reserves in California.
And with that, now we'll be counting down to the new year. 5,
4,
3,
2,
1,
Happy New Year!
and have a wonderful 1930.
I'm Anthony Valenino,
And I'm Zainab Kiam.
and thank you for joining us this night.